Amen. Thank you, sir. Amen. Amen. I know Amazing Grace every time I hear it. That was good, Natasha. Thank you. All right, take your Bibles tonight to the book of Ecclesiastes. Ready for a pop quiz? All right, let's see how well you listened last week. Ecclesiastes, remember we said that part of this title is taken from a Greek word, ecclesia, which means church. Church. The word ecclesia in the Koinonia Greek, which the New Testament was written in, it could mean, according to how it's used, it could be a mob. If a mob is called out to they could be called an ecclesia. But in our belief, and how we use that word in the connotation, it is a called out group of believers that have joined themselves together to serve God and fulfill the Great Commission. That's just what a church is. Here we find also that you don't really have a church unless you have a preacher. All right? So now, notice in verses 1 to 3, and we'll review this just for a moment. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, by this, we believe that this to be, of course, Solomon. Then he says, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. There's a lot of ways we can tell you that that word can be used. One, it's empty. It's of no value. Another synonym could be futile. There's just no good coming out of it. And what Solomon is saying here is that life is empty. It's futile. And as you read through this, and we're going to see the division of it as our study progresses, but you'll find out that Solomon was really thinking that because Solomon was allowed by God to do so much, even in the area of wickedness, of drunkenness, of immorality, until he came to realize that all is vanity unless you remember the Creator. Unless you know and serve God. That's in chapter 12. Now, notice in verse 3, what profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? Remember we told you last time a good way to look at that under the sun is here on earth. So he's saying, man, if everything is futile, then what profit can a man have? And we're going to go on to see, and we'll see this tonight, that he came to realize all men die all animals die. So here we have worked and worked and worked, and then we die and we leave it all. And that's why he cries out, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. It's futile. Now, we talked to you last time. What would we say the main topic of these 12 chapters is going to be? It's a short statement. Is blank really worth living? Life. I mean, you think about it. Here you are, probably the richest man in the world at the time. And as an absolute monarch, nothing could be refused to you. And every day you go out and you satisfy all the sensual habits and appetites that a person can possess. But when you go into your room at night and you lay your head on your pillow and you do that and not being satisfied, not being happy, not being joyous. Boy, you stop and think about it. If you look at it almost without the New Testament, and I'll bring this out a little bit more later. If you look at just what he writes in the first 10 chapters of Ecclesiastes, you'll say, man, you know what, that's right. I'm going to work my whole life, and then I'm going to leave all that I made. I'm going to leave it, and probably my kids are going to fight over it, and they're going to be mad at each other, or I won't leave them anything, and boy, they're really going to be mad at me. So what is the use of all this? Boy, listen, there's some wonderful answers to this. Can you think of a more practical subject than, can I enjoy life? Is life worth living? And we can say, absolutely. So, we started last time talking about number one, the problem declared, chapters 1 and 2. Notice in verse 4, one generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he rose. In other words, it's going to do it again in the morning, go down at night. Of course, we know the sun doesn't go down. We know the earth rotates on its axis and in orbit. We understand that. But he said it happens every day. Every day. Now, notice what he says. Verse number 6. The wind goeth toward the south, turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers came, thither they return again. What's he talking about? Goes out, clouds come, sun's there, evaporates, makes clouds, goes over the sea, over the land, rains, and goes back into the rivers. Comes back to the sea never gets full. Now, go on here. Verse number 8. All things are full of labor, man cannot utter it. What does he mean? He says full of labor. The idea there is you're worried all the time. You can't figure things out. And then he said man cannot utter it. He cannot express it. He cannot explain it. He cannot understand how all this happens. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. You ever wondered where all the sounds you hear that go inside your ear, where they go? That's pretty deep thinking when you stop and think. That's what Solomon said. How does the ear not get full of all the hearing we do? How does the eye not get full with all the seeing? The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. You ever heard this? History repeats itself. Did Israel not prove that? right with God, sinned, God judged them, got right with God, stayed right for a while, sinned again. What? This repeats itself. Let me share something with you. This ought to scare you a little bit, maybe. You check history, world history. Check the Roman Empire. Many historians believe the Roman Empire was the strongest, most successful empire that ever was. You realize the Roman Empire is one of the reasons that Europe has roads? They started the road system so they could get their armies different places at different times to conquer other countries. The Roman Empire failed. Now what's this? They really weren't defeated. They crumbled morally. You ought to read Gibbon's book. It's about that big, but you ought to read it on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Two things. Let me just mention two of the reasons he gave. One was an overemphasis on recreation. Remember the Colosseum, gladiator fighting, and the martyring of Christians, and all these things. They had circuses there. They had all this entertainment. The second thing was this: they did not have strong moral character. Prostitution, homosexuality. Every nation that has ever fallen morally has fallen completely. Have you ever heard people say this? They can't find the United States in Bible prophecy. I think I could not do damage to Scripture, but I could read into something that might be true. But you know, for all practical purposes, we're not mentioned. Why is that? Because we cease to be a world power. One of the reasons, and maybe the only reason, that God has not totally destroyed America. And we can't be proud about this, but it's because of churches like ours across this country that still hold to the truth of the Bible. Missionaries are being called. Missionaries are being sent. We're involved in doing the Great Commission and taking a stand against the plague of our nation, abortion and the homosexual agenda. And by the way, they have an agenda. So here we go. Boy, Solomon, here he is. He's talking about all these things. Now notice in verse number 10, he says, "Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new?" You say, well, what about computers? They had types of computers in China centuries and centuries ago. What was that thing they called it where they, abacus? We've just developed on what they did. I remember when I was in Bible college and boy, they just really harped on us preacher boys. Boy, if you get a sermon from some other man, you give him credit for it when you preach it. Don't plagiarize. Well, I remember some years after I was out of college, I was on staff at Levon Drive Baptist in Garland, and we had Dr. Tom Malone for a Bible conference, and we were at lunch one day, and I said, Dr. Malone, I said, could I preach some of your outlines, and I'll give you credit for it? He said, you preach anything I have, but don't you dare give me credit. I said, well, I was taught I was supposed to do that. He said, yeah, but then I got to go find out where I got all these things. He said, there is nothing new under the sun. He said, you know, you think you've found something new in the Bible? You wait about a week and somebody will have a sermon in print talking about what you think is new. There's nothing new under the sun. You may say something a little differently. You have a different voice. You have different mannerisms. It's the same thing. He said, yeah, preach what I have. But his were so stinking long, I couldn't get all of them in. I could preach a series off one of his sermons. But anyway, it hath been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. You know, you talk to children today, young people, and I enjoy doing this. I'll say, hey, you baseball guy, boy, y'all should have seen Mickey Mantle play. Who? Mickey Mantle. Who was he? Who was he? What about Ted Williams? No, who's that? Soon they're forgotten. The only few that remember are those that are interested in sports history and memorabilia and things like that. If you start reading records, you begin to see that. I don't think his 400 batting average has been broken, I don't think, in all these years. He had a lifetime batting average of over 400. Ted Williams. Boy, wished I could have done that. Now, we read those verses to give you point number one under Roman numeral 1. Roman numeral 1, the problem declared. Number 1, man is only a cog in a great big wheel. What is man compared to the vastness of the world? Have you ever really stopped and thought how small your world really is compared to the world? The other day, and I don't know why this thought, I guess from studying this and putting things together, I was driving downtown for some reason, and the thought came to me, I wonder what people are doing in London right now. And they don't even know I exist. And I don't know they exist. They know there's a United States and they know there's a Texas, and because of Fixer Upper, they know there's a Waco. But they don't know us. We don't know them. We're just one cog in a great big wheel. I mean, when you really stop and think about it, everything in nature continues century after century, but we're only here for a brief time. You know, he said if you could live to be 70 or 80, boy, you're going to be greatly blessed. But we are only a very small part. But watch it, we're a very important part. Why? Because as newborn believers, we're God's children. And we ought to be involved in God's plan. Now watch this. In our part of the world. What is your part of the world? What's my part of the world? It's that frame of influence that we have over people. Now, am I responsible for people in foreign countries? Absolutely. That's why we do Faith Promise missions. That's why we have missionaries come and stand here and present their ministry to us, and how that many times we take them on support so they can go and become a part of their world over there. It's amazing when you realize, and this is something that we all have to come to grips with, I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And that which I can do, I will do to the best of the ability that God gives me. then you and I can stand in the presence of the Lord one day and say we gave it our best shot. We affected our world. And it's amazing when you begin to narrow it down. If I'm affecting my world, and Brother Ronnie's affecting his world, and Brother Ronnie, you're doing your world, then we're making an impact. And when we make an impact, God begins to do things that we cannot even imagine Him doing. But when you look at these billions of people in the world, it all seems so meaningless. It's, as Solomon said, it's vanity. It's futile. And remember, we told you last time, he uses the word vanity or vanities 37 times in this book. I think his ideal here in these verses we just read, verses 4 through 11, that Solomon, he came to the idea, well, since life is so short and I'm so insignificant, why bother to live it at all? Number 2, I want you to grab this. Man cannot understand it all. Notice verse 12. I, the preacher, was king over all Israel in Jerusalem. And I gave my heart to seek and search out wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore or very much travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised or to understand these things. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun. Behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. When you and I, that vexation, let me give you a good way to look at that. It means like trying to grab the wind and hold the wind in your hand. You just can't do it. He said, that which is crooked cannot be made straight. That which is wanting or lacking cannot be numbered, can't be fulfilled. I communed with mine own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate. I'm very wealthy. Have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Solomon is said to be the wisest of men. Yet when he tried to understand all the aspects of life, he was baffled. He said, I don't understand all this. It's amazing when you stop and think about in our society today how many, quote, wise, end quote, philosophers have tried to explain the meaning of life. And as you listen to them or you read their articles, you realize they're as ignorant about it as I am. Is it reasonable to live when you cannot understand what life is all about? Well, if you stop here, we'd say no. I mean, what's the best you're going to end up? In the grave? That's why I'm saying you really need to see the... let me back up and say it this way. I think Solomon would not have had as near as much problem if he had had the New Testament. Boy, you think about 1 Corinthians 15, the great resurrection chapter. Boy, if he knew one day resurrection was going to happen, he'd just say, man, here you died and you're dead. Boy, if he would know that our labor is not in vain, here's the kicker, in the Lord. In the Lord. Why? I mean, Solomon alluded to it. We talked about it a little bit last week. He said the spirit of man, when it dies, it goes upward, and the spirit of the animals, it goes downward. But he didn't know anything about resurrection. Now, man is only a cog in a big wheel. Man cannot understand it all. Now, number 3. Death ends it all. Notice in chapter 2. Chapter 2. Oh, wait a minute. No, let me back up. Number 3. Man's pleasures never satisfy. Notice chapter 2, verse 1. I said in mine heart, go to now. I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? It doesn't accomplish what I thought it would do. I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do unto the heaven all the days of their life. I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit. I made pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatsoever mine eyes desired I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor. And this was my portion of all my labor. I had joy in what I was doing. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. Solomon had plenty of everything. And when he went to bed at night, he still wasn't satisfied. Solomon didn't know the teachings of the New Testament about godly contentment. God was using him to be able to put into words for us to see that what this world can do for us will never bring us what we really need and what we really are looking for. Let me ask you this. Would you like to have real lasting joy? The only way you get that is with God. It's the only way. This world will rob you of your joy. It will steal joy from you. It'll take it away from you. I've mentioned this before, and I've had several millionaires that were friends of mine, and I've asked every one of them in the past, I said, how much do you really want now? I said, just a little more. And they were not greedy. They were just saying, I can do more with it if I had more. But they weren't satisfied with the, 15, 20, 30 million that they had. They wanted a little more. Things never satisfy. How many of you, I'm looking around, some of us will remember. Can you remember any Christmas where your son or daughter, or son and daughter, thought they were going to die if they didn't get a certain present? And maybe a week after Christmas, something new was on television. Daddy, if I could just have that, I wouldn't ask you for anything else. Now, Daddy, if you believe that, I've got some swampland I want to sell you. Remember this, with our children, with ourselves, things never bring satisfaction. It'll bring happiness for a season. I've known of people that God had blessed them with things and money. And then one of them I'm thinking in particular lives a long way away from here, but he's always afraid somebody's going to steal it from him. And he's always waiting for, he never spends anything because he's waiting for a rainy day. Remember that old saying? We got to save for a rainy day. Now, I believe in saving. I believe in that. But I also believe that for God's work, there are thunderstorms going on right now. And God's work needs to be supported. Mission projects need to be done. Buildings on foreign fields need to be built. Things need to be done. And probably you don't realize this, but missionaries have to have money to build things. And guess where that money comes from? It comes from God's people. That's where it comes from. That's why we do missions. Somebody asked me one time, said, you really do push missions, don't you? And I said, I really do. You know, one reason I do is I want you to be blessed. And you get involved in God's business, you will be blessed. You get involved with what is close to God's heart. I'm going to say it in probably a bad way. You're going to get God's pocketbook open to you. Because give, and it shall be given unto you. God doesn't put it in a holler stump, but it'll come from sources you can't even imagine. And it may not be necessarily dollars that you get. Might be years added to your health. Could make your tires on your car go longer. May make the engine last longer. Now, I would suggest tuning it up every once in a while. I went down just for my own benefit a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, and just had them check the tires on my car. And the guy there at Discount Tire, he said, "Good night, you have a lot of tread left." He said, "Man, do you not drive this?" I said, "Well, you check my mileage, how many miles I've got on these." He said, "I don't understand." I said, "Those are tithing tires." He looked at me and said, "What?" I said, "Those are tithing tires." And it opens a door to witness. Solomon is coming to some sad conclusions that are good for us to come to without having to go through what Solomon went through. Let me review what we covered tonight. Number one, man's only a cog in a big wheel. Number two, man cannot understand it all. Man's pleasures do not satisfy. If you're taking notes, put a dash there and say ever. You won't be satisfied with this world. Let me close with this. This is close to home. Have you ever gone out to eat and you'll eat and eat and you'll say, "Man, I don't think I want anything for a week." And you get home and look in the refrigerator. I took my grandsons and Wynn. We went to Waffle House a couple of trips ago. I was over there. We have a tradition to go to Waffle House on my way to the airport. And I told Wynn, we've done it for about 7 years now, 6 or 7 years. And I said, look, the only rule is that boys can have whatever they want, all they want. This last time cost me over $60 to eat at Waffle House. But Wyatt, I thought he was going to bust. Triple order of hash browns, 2 glasses of orange juice, 2 waffles, eggs, sausage, bacon. We went home for me to get my bags, and I looked around, and here he come walking through with a big piece of chocolate cake. I thought, dear Lord, I think I'd rather clothe him as feed him. I think he'd wear clothes longer than than he'd have to eat so much. But those things of the world never satisfy, and they don't last. Only Christ lasts. God bless you. We're going to stop there.